All right. Hi, everybody. This is Malcolm Moore with Creativity is the Cure. Today, I have got my good friend Matt Ritchey with me here today. Matt and I have known each other quite a long time. We've written 2 shows together. First, we did Friendly Face from Space, which was a musical for kids. And then we put on this great show called Mr. Malcolm's Music Factory with our good friends from the Henson Studios Puppeteers. So, how you doing, Matt?
I'm good. Let me actually just start off by apologizing. If I'd actually known that I was doing the podcast today, I would have worn nicer shoes. So
Sorry to surprise you, yeah. So let's start out with this. What do you do for a living? I know it's a loaded question.
Yeah. For me, living implies the thing that you get money for, where you pay your bills and eat. So for that, currently, I am teaching improv and acting for kindergarten through 8th. The thing that I am doing the second I leave work, though, is I'm a screenwriter, I'm an actor, I'm a director, and I also have a company called Story Crafting, where I help other writers with their stories, their scripts, their ideas, ways to get things more professionally tailored.
Very good. You are a true Renaissance man, as they say.
I like to think so. I wear pantaloons a lot.
My wife, Christine, is a big fan of the pantaloon. How about your schooling? Before we get into the creativity, I know because I worked with you, you're such a great actor, director. You know a little bit about everything, especially about theater and live stage, and you've done commercials and things like that. What is your background with schooling? College-wise,
I was not doing well in math in high school, which is pretty typical for a lot of super creative people. And I really thought, exactly. I really thought I was going to be like, I told my parents, I'm like, I'm just going to go out to LA and see how it goes, which in retrospect would have been both a better idea and I'd be dead now, depending on how you want to look at it.
Indeed.
I was not ready to do that alone. But my mom actually said, I'll make you a deal. Really buckle down and let's see if we can get you into an art school. We'll specifically try to do something where you can go for theater or acting or something.
Right.
And so when we toured colleges and stuff, that was it. That's the only kind of places that I really applied. And I went to NYU, which was fantastic.
And just so everybody knows, you're like me, from the East Coast, but now we're on the West Coast.
Exactly. Yeah. I was born in Baltimore and I grew up parts of Connecticut, Morgantown, West Virginia for a little while, and then went to NYU, which at the time was just fantastic. I lucked out being in a studio called Playwrights Horizons, where not only did I take kind of the classic, like you have to take your acting class, you got to take a movement class, you got to take a voice and a speech class, but in addition to all of that, you had to take a directing class. You had to take a intro to not-for-profit theater to kind of learn about how to do that. And you had to take a design class, and you had to take all of these different things, so that the kind of unspoken or unwritten word of this was, by the time you graduate, you should be able to go into a black box theater, light it, do the sound, write something for it, direct yourself, and act in it, and be your stage manager. I mean, you should know how to do all
right.
Of the different
And
things.
because we work at the same school, I see you do that with the kids. They not only learn lines and get to act, but they're going to know everything: costumes, staging, all that stuff.
That's
Great
the goal. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
What is your first memory of using creativity? I know that's kind of vague, but what's your memory, the youngest you were, when you started thinking in a creative way?
I don't know how fair this is, because some of this it was recorded, which is probably why I remember it so well. But my dad had one of those reel-to-reel tape recorders. I'm not 19, and
I had one as well.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah. And what I would do is, when I was young, I'm talking like kindergarten or younger, there were these records, Peter Pan Records came out with a subset called Power Records, where it would be these book on record stories of superheroes.
I remember. Yeah.
Okay. And I had one, there was a Batman one, which is Batman and the Joker. And I listened to it over and over and over and over and over again. And while my dad, pulled out the old recording device one night just to say some things, I said I wanted to do something, and I spoke the entire book and record with the music, the sound effects, the special effect, all me.
Oh man! Next time you're on the podcast, you got to bring that.
Oh, I don't think it exists anymore, but I'll ask.
I'm going to make some calls.
Perfect. Done.
Okay.
I'll just do it right now from memory.
So that's your first memory,
That's the first
kind of performing the book.
Yeah, that's in terms of creative memory wise. The first thing that I actually remember that is not, because that's kind of a memory of a thing that I probably listened to later on, and I remember, this is. But the first thing that I actually remember doing is I had an after-school acting class when I was living in Connecticut. I want to say this was second grade, and where you write your own plays and do your own plays. And I wrote a play called Lagoon, A Detective's Job. And it was about a detective who had lost something or had to find something. And I wrote it, I directed it, I played.
And what age is this?
Second grade, I want to say.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm talking, this was like trench coat, direct address to the audience. I didn't know what third walls were, but I was doing the class. I guess I'd watched enough detective things where, I was turning to the audience in a trench coat and going, so that wasn't helpful. So I went to the next guy and I asked him about this, that.
So we're talking about second grade noir.
Yeah, second grade noir. Exactly. I didn't know what it was, but that's a good title for something, by the way. I may take that.
So we keep this specific. Your job now, working with the kids. How old are the kids you work with?
Kids are, I do improv, like games and social emotional stuff for kindergartners and all the way up through fourth grade. And then I also work at a separate middle school where I teach 7th and 8th grade, and that's acting, just acting. We do, I'm actually getting them to write their own short plays this semester so they can perform them at the end. So I want to get some of that in there as well. Originally, I was just going to call it story crafting. But the kids would not understand what that is. So,
an important thing about this podcast is its creativity secure, and we're trying to think outside the box about creativity. So not just writing a song, drawing a picture, writing a play. What I want to know is when you work with students, and I work at the same middle school with you, I think we can agree that teenagers from time to time can be slightly challenging. So my question to you is, how do you use the creative part of your brain to deal with the challenges that we face at school? Because these kids are going through emotional upheaval and, slightly unpredictable. How do you use your creativity to help you get through the challenges?
I think that's... Let me go back to something that John Cleese talks about creativity a lot. I don't know how much you discuss him on the podcast, but he has a whole thing on creativity.
And he actually wrote a great book on creativity that I let you borrow. Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah.
But I bring him up because since some of the improv stuff that I do, I'm teaching the kids to kind of go with the flow and just be open to things. And that is kind of how I feel, especially for the middle school kids. It's less about what I bring in to try to force them to do things that are creative, because you can't force anybody to do anything creative.
Right.
It's more in the moment. Here's the assignment, and they say, I don't want to do this, or I have an issue with this, or I can't think of this, or I can't think of this. I need to say yes, and I need to be like, okay, so, and in the moment, just tell me your favorite this. Tell me you're this. Tell me you're this. And whatever their answer is, I'm going to have to riff on that and find a way to, just through talking and saying, sure, okay, how can we how can you do something that you're excited about
Right.
that is connected to what we're doing right now?
Right. And for people out there that don't know the basic tenets of improv, the yes and thing, just give everybody a backup that who's not been to Groundlings or Second City.
It's just say no to everything. You grew up in the 80s. You understand just say no. We know. It's a whole Reagan thing. The basic tenets of improvisation are, if you're doing a scene, the simplest thing in the world is if you're doing a scene between two people, I say, you're an alien.
And I say, no, I'm not.
Okay. You're Bigfoot. And what's going to happen in this scene is I'm a pirate. You're Bigfoot and I'm a pirate. And we're in the desert. And go.
So you're saying it would be better that I say yes and.
Oh, of course.
Nope.
Because as soon as you say no,
we're done.
We're done. I got nothing to do. If I say, okay, you're Dracula and we're in Texas, and you just go, oh, absolutely, no problem. And you immediately, and I say, okay, start the scene. And you go, because you're melting. Now I've got something to play with.
Exactly.
So that's what it is.
And so you're saying you're doing this with the students.
Yeah. Well, not even necessarily as a game, just
right.
as a life thing.
Right. If you come to an impasse with a student who's challenged, you're trying to yes and them to keep it going and work with what you got.
Exactly.
Right.
And weasel your way around to find out what they are interested in and what they like. And say, okay, this thing that I'm talking about that you may not be seemingly think you're not interested in, let's find out what you like and how you can apply it to this. See how much cooler this is now? And that has been working thus far.
So far. Yeah. So far, so good.
So far, so good.
All right, so on the same theme, talking about creativity in general and the way you just told me you helped the students, can you think of a time where you had a challenge in your life, really nothing to do with what you do for a living or your acting, directing, that creativity has totally saved you because you're able to use that part of the brain to solve the puzzle in some way? I don't know about you, but I often, if I'm stuck, it's almost like Terminator in my brain with the random answers. I'm like, okay, that didn't work. What?
So,
think of something, maybe there was a family issue or a health issue or a vocational issue, anything at all where you were out of ideas and then somehow the creative part of your brain saved you.
I'm trying to think where the creative part of my brain. Well, okay. I think this is going to answer your question, but it's not. All right, this is going to go down a rabbit hole. When I was, let's start in first grade, first or second or third grade. Pretty sure it was first grade. I was a very introspective, little weird, nothing's changed. But, I liked what I liked, and, I was a kind of sensitive kid, and I vividly remember a whole bunch of the guys in class were saying something about they were going to beat me up after school. And I remember during art class, rather than doing the art, I told everybody, "Oh well, they're gonna kill me after school." So I wrote out my will. I literally, I remember it was a piece of construction paper, manila colored construction paper, and I wrote out Matt's will, and I was giving people my toilet, and I was giving them my shower, and all the things and whatever. And I was making, and people were laughing, and they thought it was really funny. I'm like, oh, okay, there you go. And then nothing happened after school. I never got beat up.
Yeah.
And I was using humor and creativity as a defense mechanism, as a way to make people laugh so that I would be safe. And that is something that unfortunately
continued
a lot. Well, yeah, and so that's where,
even in conversations with yourself.
Yeah, clearly we're similar. Yeah, that's so. So in a lot of ways, it's the creativity telling my brain it is saving me.
Right.
So yeah, that's actually a time that I can think that.
I think that's really good. And I love biographies, and I've read so many. And I think for the ones I've read by comedians, you're right. It's a defense mechanism. It's a survival instinct.
Yeah.
And I mean, you do so many things. Obviously, you're up there with comedians. You're a funny guy. And so I've even seen that at work. You're using humor to survive or get through the day.
Yeah. Not self-immolate. Yeah, exactly.
All right, now on to something slightly lighter. Who is a musical artist that you admire that's very creative in your opinion? I know there's a lot of people I like that keep doing the same type of songs, and you know what to expect. But who do you think is somebody that's really prolific and extra creative? Who inspires you?
There's two who I've just been fans of since the beginning, who are very different. One of them, I'm a huge Trent Reznor fan.
Exactly.
I'm a huge Nine Inch Nails fan. And what really surprised me was when he started doing the soundtrack stuff.
Yeah, with Atticus.
Yeah, and the first, one or two of them was like, okay, this is Nine Inch Nails without vocals.
Right, like the David Lynch
exactly
stuff, yeah.
But then he did Mank.
Right.
And the whole thing was big band, and the whole thing, and he really just started going, okay, this guy's a musician.
And didn't he, on a similar theme, didn't he do Soul too?
He did Soul, yeah, exactly.
Right.
I mean, he really has branched out. But the one that even before that, who I have always loved was Daryl Hall.
Exactly.
And that was because not only do I love all the Hall & Oates stuff, because I think in 1 year in the 80s when they weren't putting stuff out, I went back and bought everything they had done from when they started in 72 all the way up to that point.
And like you've taught me, they did a lot of stuff before they were popular. A lot of work, a lot of albums.
Nearly every album was a different style.
Yeah.
And then his first solo album with Robert Fripp was this
Sacred Songs,
totally different,
or Exposure, that era.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, it was at the same time, and that was totally different. And then his second solo album was closer to the Hall & Oatesy kind of stuff, but then the third one was just like all modern soul, and then the next one was kind of like a jazz influenced soft rock kind of thing. So he's done.
I mean, we've got a guy that does adult education, and then You Burn Me Up, I'm a Cigarette.
Exactly.
Those are pretty diverse.
Yeah, exactly. And then Urban Landscape. I mean, it's totally, yeah. So those are the, and again, the older I've gotten, not to prolong this one particular question, but as I've gotten older, I've discovered more about artists who I only knew bits and pieces of. So like through you, for example, the stuff I know about Bowie now, as opposed to the stuff I knew about Bowie in the 80s.
Right.
And the stuff I know about Prince now, as opposed to back in the 80s, just because of the relatively small circles and the kinds of things that I could listen to back then.
Right.
I didn't know all of
the depth.
Yes, exactly. And nobody taught me. So.
And I think you're making me think of why I like Daryl Hall. I mean, I love his songwriting. I like all his stuff. What an incredible, unique voice. But his vocal gymnastics at the end of every song, when he's riffing on top of the melody and the chord changes, nobody. I mean, for me as a drummer, I could listen to the Police and I could tell you every little fill that Stuart Copeland does. Same with Daryl Hall. All those little inflections at the end, that's creativity. That's stream of consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. And he would do that not only in the studio, but you get the right song when he does it live.
Yeah.
And he's just in that.
I mean, and you know more about him than me. My guess is he's almost like a jazz musician. If you see him live 3 nights in a row, it'll probably be pretty different, right?
Yeah, it's going to be different every single night. There are certain songs or certain bits of things that are going to wind up being the same, but you get the right song, and he's always, his vocal inflections are always different.
Yeah.
His phrasing, winds up being different, and they change it up. I mean, I'm sure they've played these songs so many times now that they
what are you gonna do?
The arrangements change and all kinds of stuff. So
you got to keep yourself interested.
Exactly.
Now onto one of your favorite things: directors of TV or film, or people that do both. I know that it's flipped in recent years. Movies used to be bigger, now TV shows are. I know this is going to be tough for you. Pick one. Let's just pick one director that you happen to like. You don't have to say it's your favorite one, but who do you think is the most creative, and who surprises you every time you see their work? And I know that's a lot for you because you're such a good writer, and you've really taught me about how movies and plays and everything work, why they're good and why they're not. And this is beyond opinion. So keep that in mind.
Right now, Denis Villeneuve is, everything that he does is different and amazing. But the guy that I really, starting in the 90s, I went, this guy's stuff, was David Fincher.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't
variety.
know what it was. Yeah, so some of it is just he always did very dark work.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And I liked the look of everything that he was
cinematography.
Doing. But the storytelling was also so good. That's a and he's done one or two movies since where I've just kind of gone, it's maybe not my thing. But there's a handful.
But he's brave enough to keep trying stuff.
Of course,
that you might not. It's kind of like Prince. I mean, I love Prince, and who knows how many albums? I mean, how many songs? Maybe 500 songs. If I like 480 of them, that's pretty damn good.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like the only way that you can be a major artist and have everything be fantastic all the time.
Yeah.
Is if you do just three things and you're done.
Yeah, and being not afraid to fail.
Yeah.
Because for me, I'm inspired by people that are brave enough to not only sound like nobody else, but maybe one album after the first album, you don't sound like yourself on the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I know you pretty well. Your favorite movie, Indiana Jones.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yep.
Why? Why is that your favorite movie?
I think some of it is because it's just pure story, character, adrenaline, entertainment, straight through. It's...
I mean, from your writer, director, actor point of view, because you do everything, does that hit all the marks for you?
All of them. And I mean, from a storytelling perspective, I think they've dotted every I and crossed every T. Like, I can't see even the things that people say are problematic in that movie. They filmed scenes that fill in those gaps.
Yeah.
They just never put them in the movie. It's so much fun. All the performances are exactly right for what that movie is supposed to be. The pacing is perfect. The style is perfect for what it's supposed to be. They did the old school cinematography for that. It was all supposed to be shot like an old 1930s serial. There's nothing in there that is inappropriate, which sounds weird.
So you're saying like anybody could watch it. Pretty much anybody would like it.
Yeah. I mean, like, once you get to a certain... you don't want to maybe have your little kids watch the very end with the melty faces. But anyone can see this adventure movie, and it's going to be great fun.
You're making me think of that famous... I'm going to have to paraphrase. I remember Ice Cube, the rapper. Mm-hmm. He's very well known, doing, a very edgy rap. And then he starts making family movies. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the, his peers are like, dude, why are you making family movies? What happened to your music? He goes, would you rather, like, if I made a movie, do I want one person to go or the whole family? So it sounds like that's what you're saying. if you're really good at what you do, somehow you've got to appeal to everybody out there. I mean, that's a big argument people have. You know, should you make your eccentric stuff that makes you happy, or should you, I mean, let's say you're writing a poem. Do you want everybody that reads your poem to interpret it the same way? Or do you not care because you've got to get this very original idea in your head that may be abstract out there? Mm-hmm. How is that important to you? I mean, you're so prolific. Do you do a little bit of both? A little bit of strange stuff that maybe makes you feel content, but then also, all right, with Malcolm, we got to make this kid's puppet show so everybody likes it.
I think both of those things are really important.
Yeah.
You know, there's no, you're actually, tuning into one of the things that frustrates me about myself that I haven't done, which is I use lots of things as excuses for not pushing the envelope and not going and doing bigger and more and better things.
And is that driven by the fact that you want success?
It's probably a fear.
Right.
And whether it's fear of success or fear of failure or fear of whatever it is, there's this weird vacillating belief of I won't be able to do something at this level / at the same time, if somebody told me you wouldn't be able to handle doing that at that level, I'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? Of course I can do that. So it's that weird thing.
Talking to me.
But the reason I bring it up with this question is, I think it's important to do just whatever you want to do creatively. But if you know that you can do it a certain way that may not be exactly what you had in your mind, but by changing it just a little bit, it'll become accessible to a whole lot more people.
So you're saying looking for a balance of hitting both targets.
Yeah, and it depends on the project. Listen, there's some things that
with Lou Reed, you've got Walk on the Wild Side. Everybody loves that, but metal machine music, not everybody's cup of tea.
Not everybody's thing, exactly. And you can do both, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Can you do both at the same time, though? It sounds like that's what maybe one of your goals was.
Well, I'm saying there are sometimes you can do both at the same time, but that's, at that point, you are either looking at that as I need to make a compromise, or you can look at it as I'm going to try to blend these things and it's going to get better because of changing things up a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Right. How about your parents? Do you feel that any of your creativity you biologically inherited from your parents? When you look at them and you think about what you're good at and how you use your creativity.
Yeah.
Can you see who it's from? I mean, obviously a lot of it is individual, just who you are. But what part of that do you get from your mom or your dad?
I got a lot. I think I got just about everything from my mom's side of the family. That's not entirely fair. But in broad general strokes, my dad has been the very logical, scientific. My father is an incredible doctor. And my mom's side of the family, that's where, my grandmother wanted to be an actress, and she did that for a while. And my cousin is an actor, and my grandfather...
All mom's side of the family.
Yeah, so it really is. Now, I have, some cousins on the other side of the family who want to be involved in some of this as well. But that's kind of like younger than me. It's not kind of like going back. So I really think that most of the creative stuff and the crazy ideas that I have come from my mom's side of the family, and you need to logically look at this and find a way to pay for this material comes from my dad.
Think because I know you so well, this would be my guess. Yes, you get that creativity from your mom. But I think the reason why I would rather work with you on any creative project, probably more than anybody, is because you're so organized, you're so driven. The first time I got to know you, I was really caught off guard because you're like, okay, let's do this. And the next day you're like, is it done? You get stuff done right away. And my guess is you get that part from your dad. And even though maybe the creativity is from your mom, you would not be as effective if you didn't have that from your dad.
Absolutely. I no question. And that's, and I do think of it exactly that way. for a long time I didn't have enough of that.
Right.
But that's the thing that has really enabled me to do, well, Fringe so
Right.
well. And that is where I put a lot of basis on how I get both sides of my brain to work together, is all the
Yeah,
Fringe
I think
stuff.
completely unlike me, and you know me well, you're pretty even with the right brain, left brain. I have not seen any evidence to the contrary.
It may be. It may be.
All right. Let's take a minute. Tell me about story crafting. Who does that appeal to? What is your goal? Where'd you get the idea? How does that fit into your life?
Story crafting is, I look at it as a way to take all the things that, not only that I love to do, but all the things that I'm actually good at doing and finding a way to help people. I love directing. I love writing. I love acting, but I also like teaching a lot. So story crafting is kind of a way to work with writers or artists who have a project, whether it is a screenplay that needs to be written or has already been written, or a stage play that maybe an actor has an idea for and wants to do something and doesn't know how, or a short story writer or whoever that may be, to kind of collaborate with me. There's a lot of people who do coverage and a lot of people who do kind of writing coaching. And I look at things from multiple different viewpoints, not only from a writing perspective in terms of let's talk about structure. And
Well, everything you learned in college, right?
everything, literally,
Right.
that's it. So I can take a look at a piece of paper and a scene or something and go, okay, well, from an acting perspective, I'm going to ask you these questions, whether
Right.
they're, and from a directing standpoint, I'm going to look at them like this and say, you need to think about how this would get staged or how you would plan on doing this. From a producer standpoint, I'm like, are you trying to sell this? You should have X, Y, and Z, and do you know how much this is going to cost based on how you're writing it? And then from an assistant's point of view, you need to know, okay, I got to write it a certain way, and I have to have my, structure and I's crossed and T's dotted kind of stuff. And just from a character and storytelling perspective, I like to just collaborate with people and
Yeah.
say, okay, what were you trying to do with this? Okay, well, what if, and here's what I got from it, what if we did this? Are you trying to do this? And just working through it in the same way that, number one, you and I have done. And
Right.
we were just saying, working with students is exactly the same.
Well,
What?
I mean, to tell everybody out there listening, I know it firsthand. You know me well. I'm not balanced right and left brain. I'm a very creative person, but I would self-describe myself as mental and creative diarrhea. It's like out of control. And I remember coming to you with my idea for Mr. Malcolm's Music Factory, and I had like, here's 100 ideas that I want to do. And you're like, oh, good. And then we had to whittle it down to maybe 6 or 7.
Right.
And then you had to teach me the form of how an effective story is written out. I thought I was a pretty good writer until I met you. And you just showed me what was effective, the form of it, how it works. And I was like, well, we should do this, this, and this. And no, you're like, no, let's focus on these things to make it more effective. You taught me about character, form, writing, humor. And it was done so well. We made such a good form that once we had done the performance a couple times, then me and the other performers, we started improvising because it was such a good structure to play off of.
Yeah.
So yeah, I recommend to anybody if you're trying. I mean, I'm sure you meet a lot of people like me. I've got this idea. And you're like, good. And then let's see how we can make this work. What are you missing? What is there too much of? How can we stay on the storyline?
Yeah.
The whole, maybe you can explain to everybody the arc, the 3 parts. Like we split the play up into. Can you tell everybody that, how a good basic story works?
Well, I always look at everything from the kind of the classic hero's journey 3-act structure, right?
Tell us a really simple version of that.
Star Wars is the absolute simplest, easiest. You've got a main character who wants something. Usually it's a physical thing or there's something that they want to do. But they're in a place where they can't do that. And then they have to set off on a journey in order to go and get that thing. But they also have an internal need, something that a lot of people call it a flaw, right? Something that they need to overcome. Again, using Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, for example, really wants to go off and destroy the Empire, right? Join the rebellion and destroy the Empire.
Right.
But he also doesn't believe in himself. And he wants to learn the Force, but he doesn't believe in himself enough, right?
Right.
So when he has the opportunity to leave Tatooine, he doesn't. He says, I got to stay here. And it's only when the stormtroopers come and destroy everything that he says, okay, well, now I'm going to go off on this journey. And so now you've moved on to your Act 2. Act 2 goes up to a midpoint where you're trying to do this one specific journey where they're trying to go and get the princess. But whoops, now they're stuck on the Death Star. And now the next part of the midpoint is things have changed. They're not trying to get to a planet for the princess. Now they have to rescue the princess because she's right here,
right,
and get off. So it's part of the same story.
So the second act is more like the turmoil.
Exactly.
It's got to seem like it's unsolvable.
Exactly. And if that's once you hit the end of Act 2, that's your low point.
Right.
That's where you're in the worst possible scenario. So for Luke Skywalker, he watches Obi-Wan Kenobi get killed in front of him. Like the last person who was really in his life from a young kid is now gone. And then Act 3 is when your hero has to go and have the big battle to try to win and get the thing that they want. And again, Luke wants to destroy the Empire, but in order to get that thing that he wants, he needs to overcome his internal flaw, which is he doesn't believe in himself. He doesn't trust himself.
Right.
So at the end of
the movie, hence the hero's journey.
Exactly. So at the very end, when he's going down that trench, he tries to fire and doesn't blow up the Death Star. And it's only when he hears Obi-Wan's voice and says, trust yourself, use the Force.
Right.
That he turns everything off, just trusts, has a moment, does it, boom. He has overcome his internal flaw, right. Therefore he has achieved his outer goal. So that works for really everything.
I mean, this isn't a new idea. I mean, you look at George Lucas, and his teacher was Joseph Campbell.
Joseph Campbell, he wrote The Thousand Faces.
Father of mythology, and even Joseph Campbell is working with ancient ideas, and George Lucas also inspired by Akira Kurosawa. Mm-hmm. So you know that these are tried and true ideas, and it's not like you're like, oh, this is the only way to do it, but
not at all.
The basic form has still got to be there. It doesn't really work unless you're doing something completely abstract.
Exactly. And most of it is about, you just need to know what that is, and then you can start saying, okay, I don't want to do this, and I don't want to do this, and I don't want to do this. You need to know the rules before you want to break them. That's my only thing. If there are people who don't want to tell that specific style of storytelling,
right,
great, awesome. But I always come from that point of view because Americans and westernized places,
that's a good point,
are so used to it. Right. That's most of what we see.
Like music-wise, better stay in 4/4.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And there's really interesting stuff if you listen to Indian music or all kinds of different. But you need to actively decide you're going to be jarred by that.
It's more of a challenge.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to read to you two quotes by two people I like a lot. I know you at least know one of them, and I think they're similar. And I'm curious to hear your reaction related to creativity.
Okay.
And maybe how, let me just read them. First one, Kurt Vonnegut, which I know you're a fan of.
Yeah.
We have to continually be jumping off cliffs and develop our wings on the way down. Now hold that thought. There's a female Buddhist monk that I like. Her name is Pema Chodron. She said something similar. To be fully alive, fully human, and completely awake is to be continually thrown out of the nest. To live fully is to be always in a no man's land, to experience each moment as completely new and fresh. To live is to be willing to die over and over again from the awakened point of view. That's life. So how do you apply that to what you do with all your creative projects?
That's all just so true.
It's just so true. Don't get sad.
Dude, but let me tell you, man, this is... Look, I know the podcast is about creativity.
Yeah.
But I know
Tangents are allowed.
but it's not about tangents. It's just that I know, and I got to imagine it's the same thing with you because we're so similar and we don't just look the same. I really hope you put up a picture of the two of us for this podcast.
Old white guys, beards, glasses.
Exactly. That's life. When you're doing it right is the way I look at that.
Yeah.
And
not everybody is going to accept that at first, but you're right. That's the deal.
And unfortunately, the reason that I say that that's life when you're doing it right is I don't think I'm doing life right. I think you get pockets of, thank you, but it's true. And by the way, there are only a handful of people who I think have gotten to the point where they just trust themselves and they trust the universe and that they can literally live like that at all times, constantly.
It's not easy.
It's not.
But whether you accept it or not, it's going to happen.
And that's where, I just took this trip to Ireland for a week. And that was one of those moments where it was just like, I'm not going to think anything in advance. I'm not going to be too worried about anything. I'm just going to let everything just be in the moment. And I was more relaxed and I was open to things. And I'm like, okay. And I didn't know where I was going half the time, but I needed to trust that this was going to be okay. And especially these days, there's so much coming at us from social media and from the news and from whatever, that even if there's positive reinforcement and you need to, you should be more open and you should be more this, it kind of comes in the form of, why aren't you more creative? Why aren't you doing more of this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you need to be more of this and you're not enough of this and you're not enough of this, and finding a way to get outside of your head and outside of the routine, I never wanted to be in, quite frankly, the situation that I'm in right now. I wanted it to be, I love going project to project.
Right.
Where I could do, I'm going to work on this thing. And then when I'm done, I'm going to move over and I'm going to do a completely different thing. And I'm going to do something. And each time it would be a brand new feeling of, I've never done this before.
Yeah.
But I think like most people, I look at this as a way of thinking, okay, the way I'm going to do that and implement this concept is any project that I work on, I am going to do something that I have not done before.
Yeah.
I am going to push myself in this direction. Even if it's a small thing, I haven't tried this. I've always thought about it. I haven't tried
Lone
doing
Falcon.
This. Like Lone Falcon.
For listeners that don't know, Matt did a great commercial. What company was it for?
It's for On Deck. It's a lone. It's a lone.
If you haven't seen it, make sure you Google or YouTube. Yeah.
Lone Falcon.
Why?
Lone Falcon. Why? Yeah.
I think that's true though, and I love to write songs, and if I get in a rut of doing the same things, I mean, mostly I'll put on a drum loop and play keyboards. But if I'm in a rut and I keep doing the same thing, I might pick a machine or an instrument that I'm not as familiar with, and it'll just take me in another direction. And so do you think that applies to these quotes for how you, especially making your own stuff, not when you're hired?
Right. 1,000,000%. It brings me actually back to music and to Trent Reznor again.
Yeah.
Where this is, again, someone who goes project to project, where he says, okay, for this album project or this thing, I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to use any chords. Everything is going to be based on just certain notes.
Single
There's
notes.
not going to be any, yeah. And then maybe he'll get to a point where he goes, okay, that hasn't worked, but it got the creative juices flowing and you're thinking in a completely different way. And by thinking in a completely different way, different things start to happen. And you can keep some of them, throw some of them away, but you're actively choosing to say, I want to go out of my comfort zone. And it's just a matter, I think, of, as people, going out of your comfort zone and any kind of change is scary until you do it enough times that it becomes normal. And it's the reason that as a country, lots of people don't want to change.
Yeah, if you can get used to feeling uncomfortable, you're probably going to keep producing better art. And you're also making me think of a great story. We're both fans of David Bowie. I don't know if you know this song, but he did this great album in the 90s called Earthling. He had at that time he had a phenomenal guitar player named Reeves Gabrels, who now plays for The Cure. There's this song called Looking for Satellites. You know, as usual, first chorus, and then it comes a guitar solo. So he's about to lay down the guitar solo, and David Bowie goes, by the way, when you do the solo, you can only use this one string on your guitar. And if you haven't heard it, check the song out. It's insane. And even Reeves said it would never have come out like that. But sometimes painting you into a corner, too, can bring out painting yourself into a corner.
Yeah. Restriction is, honestly, I think sometimes the best way.
Better than all the choices.
Yeah, well, exactly.
I mean, like the Beatles, a lot of their stuff's on a 4-track, and now you can have 200 tracks.
A million different things.
I think people lose the artistic side with too much options.
Well, it's also, I think, when you're really creative and you could like, oh, hey, you're allowed to do anything. That's kind of like, it kind of shuts things down in a way, you know, because the creative thing to do is like, you have the color red, you have a screen, and you have one bongo.
Yeah.
I want a song and a stage play in 20 minutes.
Yeah, and we always talk about that show Diner. Why is it so good and these two guys are just sitting at a table the whole time?
Yeah.
That's a good challenge.
It's shoot, I'm trying to remember the name of the movie. You'll have to edit this. My Dinner with Andre.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
Yeah, I knew there was something there. Yeah. I think it restricting yourself at the beginning, you know, whether it's to a theme or whether it's to a sound or whether it's to a color or whether it's to a style or whatever it is actually helpful because it forces you to think, okay, well, I can't do this, and I can't do this, and I can't do this, which doesn't seem like we talk about creativity and imagination, and it's like, you should just do whatever you want. Yeah, you just think
it should be open-ended all the time.
You think it's like a hippie, 60s, anything, and it's like, it's actually the opposite.
Yeah, you're also making me think of Brian Eno. I can't remember if I told you about this, but he developed these cards called oblique strategies. And when Bowie is in that Eno trilogy era, you would have to pull a card out and you'd give one to the drummer and he's like, you are a Saudi Arabian drummer, but you just got divorced and you can't pay your water bill. Okay, keep that in mind and play it. And then you're going to give a guitar player, oh, you're a human, but they took the upholstery on the couch and they ripped it off and you have to wear that sweater.
That is genius.
Yeah, and he went on to use that with Coldplay and all these different people, you know, U2. It's so great to randomly...
It's phenomenal.
It's almost like a modern version of I Ching.
It's so great. I mean, I liken that to, you know, when you see some actors do these unbelievable performances and you find out later on they're like, oh, no, I was impersonating an animal. I was trying to do, you know, one of the simplest things. Have you ever seen Sexy Beast?
No. I know you've been harassing me for years.
Before Die Hard, we're gonna watch that one. And by the way, if any of the listeners have not seen Sexy Beast, run. This is amazing.
Yeah.
But you've got Ben Kingsley playing this.
Can't go wrong with that guy.
Mob guy, and with this incredibly specific character. Incredibly specific. And you find out after the fact, like if you're listening to interviews and stuff, he's like, oh, well, I was a vulture. It's like I was just being a vulture. And then you watch him and you go, oh my God. Like his head is tilted, so his eyes are coming at a certain angle, and he's parroting.
But wait! Sometimes you don't know. I think I brought this up to you once. There's this Anthony Hopkins. I think it's a Stephen King book made into a film called Atlantis.
Hearts of Atlantis.
Yeah, Hearts of Atlantis. There's one scene where he just seems so possessed and evil and everything. And I remember in an interview, he said, "What were you thinking about? How did you get into that?" He goes, "Absolutely nothing."
Yeah.
So sometimes it's a vulture. Sometimes you're just
Okay, sidebar. Here's the thing about Anthony Hopkins that is, I adore Anthony Hopkins. I think he's amazing. However, some of his biggest successes in terms of the world knowing him have been when he was much older. Much older.
Yeah, right. Agreed.
Silence of the Lambs and later.
Most people couldn't name his earlier films.
Right. And because of that, first of all, he's an incredibly talented human being, and he's been doing this his entire life. Similar to that, he did a movie called Titus, which was Titus Andronicus.
I've been wanting to see that forever.
Oh, it's so great. We're going to have a long weekend. But he does this scene where, again, he's this incredibly thing.
Yeah.
But when they're interviewing, he says, well, there's not much to it. I stabbed my son, and he dies on the steps, and I go down. And you go, okay, yes, sure, except you went through the exact same training that we all did, and you did this and that, but you did it all when you were in your teens and your 20s. And it's just in his DNA. It's so second nature to him now that he literally just says, oh, this is the kind of thing they're going to want. And he just does it, and it's very natural. So, yes, he's telling the absolute truth. I just do it. However, he's got about 50 to 60 years. He's
got a little bit of a card catalog to pull from.
To actually, exactly.
Yeah. And before we go, I got to mention one of my favorite things he ever did. Most people haven't seen this. Called Magic in the 70s, where he plays a ventriloquist. And I won't spoil anything, but it's a murder mystery, and all these people keep dying, and they're wondering, is it an evil puppet? Is it Anthony Hopkins' character? Is it both? Is he have split personality? You never really find out, but
and then you find out it's his father. Am I confusing movies? It might be confusing movies.
I got to ask you this question, because we say this almost every day.
Oh, man.
What's the meaning of life?
42.
There we go. Thank you, Matt Ritchey.
Dude, thanks so much. Appreciate it.